Some people think money gives them the right to decide who matters. Tonight, someone is about to learn how wrong that is. The restaurant glows in soft amber light, the kind that makes every glass sparkle and every plate look like art. Silverware clinking gently as conversations float like quiet music through the air, a place where confidence feels like part of the dress code. And Lily Carter knows she doesn't quite belong here, not in her neatly pressed but clearly worn uniform. Not with the faint scuff on her black flats or the way her fingers tighten, just a little too much around the edge of her serving tray. But she steadies herself anyway, breath slow, shoulders back, because this job, this one shift, means keeping the lights on in a small apartment 2 bus rides away, means sending $40 home by Friday, means holding on to something that hasn't fallen apart yet. And she steps forward with a polite smile, just as the hostess gestures toward table 12. Where a woman sits like she owns not just the room, but the people inside it. Victoria Cole barely looks up at first, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she scrolls through her phone, posture effortless, presence sharp, the kind of elegance that feels practiced rather than warm. And when Lily approaches with a quiet, "Good evening, welcome," the woman finally lifts her gaze, slow, deliberate, eyes scanning Lily from head to toe in a way that lands heavier than words. "Water," she says, voice cool, sparkling. "And make sure it's actually cold." And Lily nods. "Of course, ma'am." Already turning to fulfill the request when the next words come. Casual but cutting. "And try not to rush like that. It looks unrefined." Lily pauses just for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, then continues walking, the tray steady in her hands even as something tightens in her chest. She's heard worse before, much worse. But there's something about the tone, the certainty behind it, like the judgment isn't about service, it's about her. And when she returns with the glass, placing it carefully on the table, Victoria watches every movement, then lets out a faint, unimpressed exhale. "You know," she says, tapping her fingernail lightly against the rim of the glass. "People like you should really learn the difference between serving and hovering. It's not that complicated." Lily's grip tightens for a split second before she releases it, straightening just slightly. "I'll give you a moment with the menu," she replies calmly, voice even, practiced. But before she can step away, Victoria leans back, folding her arms, a faint smile forming. "Actually, wait," she says, tilting her head. "Are you even educated? Or do they just hire anyone who can carry a tray?" The words hang in the air longer than they should, louder than they sound. Nearby conversations softening as if the room itself is listening, and Lily feels it. The shift, the attention, the weight of being seen not as a person, but as something less, and for a brief second, her mind flashes to the small folded bill in her pocket, the last $10 she hasn't sent yet, the rent notice on her kitchen counter, the promise she made to herself. Not to let anything push her into becoming someone smaller than she is. And she inhales slowly, steady, her voice quiet but clear. "I'm here to make sure you have a good experience," she says, meeting Victoria's gaze just long enough to be heard. "That's what I'm focused on." But Victoria's smile doesn't fade. If anything, it sharpens. "Well then," she says lightly, "try harder." And as Lily steps back, turning to continue her shift, she doesn't notice the man seated a few tables away, dressed simply, almost deliberately so, his posture relaxed but his eyes fixed on the exchange, watching not with curiosity, but with something deeper, something measured, as if every word, every glance, every quiet choice is being noted, weighed, and remembered. The air does not return to normal after that moment. It lingers, stretched thin like a string pulled too tight, and Lily feels every second of it as she moves toward the service station, her steps measured, her posture steady. But inside something is shifting, not breaking, not yet, just adjusting, like a quiet line being drawn that she refuses to let anyone cross. She sets the empty tray down and reaches for the next order ticket. Her hands steady even as her mind replays the words, not the insult itself, but the assumption behind it, the certainty that someone like her could be dismissed so easily. And for a brief second she considers asking another server to take table 12, just to avoid whatever comes next, but the thought disappears as quickly as it arrives, because she knows exactly what that would mean, not just tonight, but to herself. And she exhales slowly, picking up the tray again, returning to the floor with the same quiet professionalism she walked in with. Meanwhile, at table 12, Victoria leans back in her chair, scrolling again, uninterested, as if nothing unusual has happened, as if the moment was not worth remembering. But her fingers tap against the screen with a faint impatience, and when Lily returns with the bread basket and places it gently on the table, Victoria does not look up right away. "I did not ask for this yet," she says, her tone light but edged. "Do you usually decide for your guests now?" Lily keeps her voice even. "It is complimentary for the table, ma'am," she replies, and Victoria finally glances up, offering a thin smile that does not reach her eyes. "Then perhaps next time you should wait to see if the table deserves it." The words land softer than before, but somehow sharper, because they are quieter, more controlled, and Lily nods once. "Of course," she says, taking a small step back. But Victoria is not finished. She never is. "Actually," she adds, setting her phone down, "I am curious. What made you choose this line of work?" The question sounds polite, almost conversational, but the pause that follows makes it clear it is not curiosity. It is evaluation, and Lily recognizes it immediately, the kind of question that is not meant to understand, only to measure, and she answers simply, "It is what I need to do right now." And Victoria tilts her head slightly, studying her. "That is a very safe answer," she says. "Do you always avoid saying what you really think?" And for a moment, just a moment, Lily considers giving a real answer, something honest, something that would not fit neatly into the space Victoria has created for her. But she lets it pass, because this is not about winning an argument. This is about something else entirely, something deeper, and she holds her ground quietly. "I focus on doing my job well," she says instead, and that is when Victoria's expression changes, just slightly, like someone who has decided the conversation is no longer entertaining enough. "We will see about that," she replies, reaching for her glass, taking a slow sip, then setting it down with deliberate care. "Because I expect a certain standard," she continues, her voice carrying just enough to reach the surrounding tables. "And I am not convinced you understand what that means." And this time the silence that follows is heavier, more noticeable, a few heads turning, a few glances exchanged, and Lily feels it again, that shift in the room, the way attention gathers without invitation. But she does not step back, she does not shrink. She simply stands there for one steady second, then nods. "I understand," she says quietly, and turns to continue her shift, unaware that across the room, the man who has been watching everything sets his glass down for the first time, his expression no longer neutral, but focused, deliberate, as if something has just crossed a line that cannot be ignored. And for him, this is no longer observation, it is decision. The rhythm of the restaurant continues, but it no longer feels the same. Not for Lily, not for the few guests who have quietly taken notice, and certainly not for the man seated near the window, because something subtle has shifted, like a current running just beneath the surface, invisible but undeniable. And as Lily moves from table to table, refilling glasses, delivering plates, offering the same calm professionalism to every guest, her mind stays anchored in one place, not on the insult, not even on the tension, but on the simple decision she made, to stand without bending, to answer without shrinking. And that decision, small as it seems, begins to carry weight in the room, even if no one says it out loud, especially not Victoria, who now leans slightly forward, tapping her fingers against the table, her patience thinning in quiet, controlled ways, as if she expected something different, something easier to dismiss. And when Lily returns with the main course, placing the dish carefully in front of her, Victoria studies it for a moment, then glances up again. "Is this how it is supposed to look?" she asks, her tone measured but unmistakably critical, and Lily nods gently. "Yes, ma'am. It is prepared according to the chef's standard." And for a second, it seems like the conversation might end there. But it does not, because Victoria lets out a soft, almost amused breath. "Interesting," she says, pushing the plate just slightly, not enough to cause a scene, but enough to signal dissatisfaction. "Because I expected something better." And Lily feels the eyes again, the subtle attention gathering, the unspoken anticipation of what she will do next. And this time, the pause is longer, not because she is unsure, but because she is choosing her words carefully, and when she speaks, her voice is still calm, still respectful, but there is something new in it, something grounded. If there is anything specific you would like adjusted, I can speak with the kitchen, she says, and Victoria tilts her head again. Watching her, measuring her, you really do not get it, do you? She replies softly. It is not about the food. And that is when the moment sharpens, when the tension becomes clear, because this is no longer about service, it is about control, about pushing until something gives, and Lily understands that now, fully, completely, and instead of reacting, instead of apologizing for something she did not do, she simply meets Victoria's gaze for a brief, steady second, not challenging, not submissive, just present, and then she says, "Then please tell me what you need." And the simplicity of it, the refusal to play into the unspoken script, creates a silence that is heavier than anything said before, a silence that even Victoria does not immediately fill, because for the first time, the dynamic is not exactly where she wants it to be, and across the room, the man by the window leans back slightly, his expression shifting into something almost imperceptible, recognition, not of status, not of role, but of character, and he watches. More closely now, not as an observer, but as someone who has just seen enough to make a decision that will change everything. The silence does not break all at once. It stretches, breath by breath, until it becomes impossible to ignore, and Victoria finally leans back in her chair again, a faint smile returning, but this time it carries something sharper, something more deliberate. "What I need," she says slowly, as if explaining something obvious to a child, "is someone who understands their place." And the words land gently in tone but heavily in meaning, drawing a quiet reaction from a nearby table, a glance. Quickly looked away, a fork paused midair, and Lily hears it all without turning, without reacting outwardly, because she knows this moment is not about volume. It is about pressure, and pressure reveals more than noise ever could. "My place," Lily repeats softly, not as a challenge, but as clarification, and Victoria nods once, satisfied. "Yes," she says, lifting her glass again. Because when you do not understand where you stand, things tend to fall apart. And for a brief second, Lily feels the familiar weight of that statement, not just from this room, but from life itself, from every job interview that ended too quickly, from every bill that arrived before she was ready, from every moment someone assumed she would accept less because she had less, and she exhales slowly, grounding herself, because she knows exactly what is being asked of her right now, not in words, but in expectation, and she chooses, deliberately, not to shrink into it. "I understand my responsibilities," she says calmly, her voice steady, "and I am doing my job." And something in that answer shifts the air again, subtle but real, because it refuses to confirm the hierarchy Victoria is trying to enforce, and for the first time, there is a flicker of irritation behind Victoria's composed expression, not loud, not obvious, but there, in the slight tightening of her jaw, in the way her fingers tap once against the table before going still. "You are very confident," she says, her tone still controlled, but thinner now, for someone in your position, and Lily does not rush to respond. She does not fill the silence to ease the tension. She simply stands there for a second, fully present, fully aware, and then she answers with quiet clarity. "Respect does not depend on position," she says, and the sentence is simple, almost too simple, but it lands with a weight that the room can feel, because it is not defensive, it is not emotional, it is certain, and for a moment, no one speaks, not even Victoria, because the conversation has shifted somewhere she did not intend it to go. And across the room, the man by the window straightens slightly, his gaze fixed now, not just observing, but fully engaged, as if the final piece of something has just fallen into place. And when Victoria finally sets her glass down again, the sound is soft but deliberate. "We will see how far that belief takes you," she says, her voice cool again. But now there is something else beneath it, something closer to challenge than dismissal. And she glances toward the front of the restaurant, where the manager stands near the host's stand, then back at Lily. "Actually," she adds, her tone shifting into something more formal, more public, "I think it is time we involve someone who can properly evaluate this situation." And she raises her hand slightly, not dramatically, just enough to signal, and within seconds, the manager begins to walk over, his posture already cautious, already aware that this table is not like the others, and Lily feels it, the next escalation forming, the moment where things could tip in a direction that affects more than just pride, and yet she does not move, she does not retreat, she simply waits, grounded in the same quiet certainty, while across the room, the man who has watched everything sets his napkin down beside his plate, his decision now fully made, his attention no longer divided, because whatever happens next, he is no longer going to remain a silent witness. The manager approaches with a careful, measured pace, his expression already shaped into that polite, neutral professionalism reserved for situations that can turn delicate without warning. And as he reaches the table, he offers a small nod to Victoria first, instinctively recognizing where the perceived authority lies. "Good evening, ma'am. Is everything all right here?" he asks, his tone calm but attentive, and Victoria does not hesitate. She never does. "That depends," she replies smoothly, folding her hands on the table as if presenting a case rather than a complaint. "I am trying to understand why your staff believes it is acceptable to speak with guests in a manner that lacks basic awareness." And the words are carefully chosen, not loud, not aggressive, but precise enough to carry weight, to shape perception before any response can form. And the manager's gaze shifts briefly toward Lily, a quick glance that carries both question and warning, the unspoken expectation that this will be resolved quickly, quietly, and in favor of the guest, because that is how things usually work, and Lily feels it, the familiar pressure of that moment, the one where it would be easier to apologize, to smooth things over, to take responsibility for something that was never hers. But she remains still, her posture composed, her voice steady when she speaks. "I have followed all service standards, and I have been respectful," she says, not defensive, not raised, just clear, and the manager's expression tightens slightly, because clarity is not always what he needs in moments like this, and Victoria lets out a soft, almost amused breath. "You see," she says lightly, glancing back at him. "This is exactly what I mean. There is a tone there, something unrefined, and the word lingers, subtle but deliberate, and a few nearby guests shift in their seats, not speaking, but listening, because the situation has moved beyond a simple complaint. It has become something else, something public, and the manager clears his throat gently, stepping a little closer, lowering his voice just enough to signal control. "Lily," he says, "perhaps it would be best if you step away from this table for now." And the suggestion is soft, but the implication is clear, and for a brief moment, the entire outcome seems to hinge on what she will do next, because this is the point where most people would step back, where they would accept the quiet correction, let the moment pass, protect the job, protect the income, protect the fragile stability they have worked so hard to hold together. And Lily knows all of that. She feels it fully, the rent, the responsibility, the thin line between staying afloat and falling behind. But she also knows something else, something just as real, just as important, and she inhales slowly, grounding herself before she speaks again. "If there is something specific I did wrong, I am open to correcting it," she says, her voice calm but unwavering. "But I have not been disrespectful." And the statement does not challenge authority. It simply refuses to accept false blame. And that is what makes it powerful. And the room feels it, that quiet shift, that subtle change in balance. Because now the narrative is no longer one-sided, and the manager hesitates, just for a fraction of a second, caught between expectation and truth, and Victoria's expression hardens ever so slightly. The composure's still there, but thinner now, because control is slipping in a way she did not anticipate. "This is becoming unnecessary," she says, her tone cooling further. "I expect a certain level of professionalism, and if your staff cannot meet that, then perhaps I need to reconsider dining here at all." And the implication lands heavily, not as a threat, but as a statement of influence, and the manager nods quickly, instinctively, already preparing to resolve the situation in the direction that protects the establishment. But before he can speak again, before the decision can settle into something final, a chair moves softly across the floor from across the room, a subtle sound, but one that draws attention without effort, and the man who has remained silent until now stands, adjusting his jacket with a calm, deliberate motion, his gaze steady, his presence shifting the atmosphere in a way that no raised voice ever could. And for the first time since the evening began, something changes in a way no one can ignore. The movement is subtle, but it pulls attention like gravity, the quiet scrape of a chair, the measured steps of someone who does not need to rush to be noticed. And as the man approaches, the room shifts without a single word being spoken. Conversations lowering, glances turning, the atmosphere tightening around something no one can yet define. And Lily sees him only in fragments at first, the edge of his jacket, the calm certainty in his posture, until he steps fully into view beside the table, his presence steady, composed, unmistakably deliberate. And he does not look at the manager first, or even at the room. He looks directly at Victoria, his gaze clear, unhurried, as if he has already seen everything he needs to see. That will not be necessary, he says, his voice calm, controlled, but carrying effortlessly across the silence. And the manager straightens immediately, recognition flashing across his face before he can hide it. Sir, he says, his tone shifting in an instant, the word alone enough to signal a change in hierarchy, a shift that ripples outward before anyone fully understands why. And Victoria's expression tightens just slightly, confusion flickering beneath her composure as she turns toward the man, studying him more closely now, searching for something familiar, something that explains the interruption. Excuse me, she says, her voice still poised, but edged with a question she did not expect to ask, and the man's attention does not waver. I said that will not be necessary, he repeats, just as evenly, then finally lets his gaze move, briefly, toward Lily, not in inspection, not in judgment, but in acknowledgement, a quiet recognition that lands without spectacle before returning to Victoria. There has been no failure in service here, he continues, and the statement is simple, but it lands with weight, because it is not an opinion, it is a decision, and the manager nods instinctively, stepping back half a pace, already recalibrating his position in the unfolding moment, while Victoria's composure begins to strain, just enough to be seen, because this is no longer a conversation she controls. And you are? She asks, her tone sharpening, reaching for authority that suddenly feels less certain, and for a second, just a second, the room seems to hold its breath, because the answer matters now, more than anything that has been said before, and the man does not rush it, he does not raise his voice, he simply reaches into his jacket, retrieving a slim card, placing it gently on the table in front of her, the movement precise, deliberate, and Victoria's eyes drop to it almost reflexively, her expression shifting as recognition sets in, not slowly, not gradually, but all at once, like a realization she cannot undo, and the silence that follows is deeper than anything before it, because it carries understanding, and the man speaks again, just as calmly. Ethan Cole, he says, not as an introduction, but as confirmation, and the name moves through the room in quiet waves, the manager lowering his gaze slightly, a server pausing mid-step, a guest at a nearby table leaning back as if to make space for the moment, and Victoria's hand stills on the edge of the table, the confidence that defined her only minutes ago now caught somewhere between disbelief and recalculation. Because this is not just a stranger, not just an interruption, this is the point where everything she assumed begins to shift, and Ethan remains exactly where he is, steady, composed, his presence no longer subtle, but undeniable, as the balance of the entire room turns in a direction no one can ignore. The name does not echo loudly. It does not need to, because recognition moves faster than sound in a room like this, and Victoria's eyes remain fixed on the card in front of her for a moment longer than necessary, as if looking at it again might somehow change what it says, but it does not, and when she finally looks up, the confidence she carried so effortlessly before has shifted into something more controlled, more cautious. Ethan, she repeats, her voice softer now, recalibrating, adjusting to a reality she did not anticipate, and for a brief second, there is an almost imperceptible pause, like she is searching for the right version of herself to respond with. But Ethan does not give her time to reconstruct the moment. He simply meets her gaze, steady, composed. There is no misunderstanding here, he says calmly, his tone even but unmistakably firm. I have been sitting here long enough to see exactly what happened, and the words are not loud, but they carry a clarity. That leaves no space for reinterpretation, and the manager shifts slightly beside them, his posture now fully deferential, his earlier uncertainty replaced with quiet alignment. While a few guests nearby exchange glances, their attention no longer hidden. Because this is no longer just a private exchange, it has become something else entirely, something public, something definitive, and Victoria straightens in her chair, drawing a slow breath. If you believe there has been a misunderstanding, she begins carefully, her tone measured, then perhaps you did not hear everything. And the attempt is subtle, an effort to regain control of the narrative, to reshape perception before it settles completely. But Ethan does not interrupt. He lets her finish. And that is what makes the moment heavier, because when he finally speaks again, it is not reactive, it is deliberate. I heard enough, he replies, his voice steady. And more importantly, I saw enough. And there is a difference between hearing and seeing, a difference that cannot be argued away, and it lands with quiet finality. And for the first time, Victoria does not immediately respond, because the usual paths available to her, influence, status, assumption, none of them fit here in the same way, not anymore. And Lily stands just a few feet away, still, composed, her presence unchanged, but the space around her feels different now, not smaller, not diminished, but recognized, and Ethan's attention shifts to her again, just briefly. And there is something in that glance, something that acknowledges not just what she endured, but how she chose to respond. And then he looks back at Victoria. Respect is not optional in this space. He continues, his tone calm but unwavering. Not for staff, not for guests, not for anyone. And the statement settles into the room with a weight that no one questions, because it is not framed as an opinion. It is a standard, and Victoria's fingers rest lightly on the edge of the table, no longer tapping, no longer signaling impatience, just still, as if holding on to composure that now requires effort. I did not intend, she begins, but the sentence does not complete, because even she can hear how it sounds, how it shifts from certainty into explanation, and Ethan does not press further. He does not need to, because the moment has already turned, and the balance that once favored her has quietly, completely, moved away, leaving her in a position she has not occupied before, one where she is no longer defining the situation, but responding to it. And the room, silent and attentive, feels it all at once. The room does not erupt, it does not need to, because the shift has already happened, quiet but absolute. And Victoria feels it more than anyone. The subtle but undeniable loss of control, the way attention no longer bends in her direction but settles somewhere else, somewhere steadier. And for a moment she remains still, her posture composed but no longer effortless. Her expression carefully held together as she searches for a response that can restore what has slipped away. I think this is being taken out of context, she says finally, her voice measured, controlled, but lacking the certainty it carried before. And Ethan does not move, does not raise his voice. He simply watches her, allowing the weight of the moment to remain exactly where it is. Context does not change what was said. He replies calmly, and the simplicity of it leaves no room for adjustment, no space to redirect. And the manager beside them nods slightly, almost involuntarily, as if acknowledging a standard that has just been made visible. And Victoria's gaze flickers briefly toward him before returning to Ethan, because now she understands that this is no longer about perception, it is about consequence. And for the first time, she hesitates, truly hesitates, before speaking again. If there has been any discomfort, she begins, choosing her words carefully now, then perhaps it would be appropriate to move forward and not dwell on it. And the suggestion is subtle, an attempt to close the moment, without addressing it, to step past it as if it never fully formed. But Ethan does not accept that either. Moving forward requires accountability, he says, his tone still even, but firmer now, not avoidance. And the distinction lands clearly, because it reframes the entire situation, not as an inconvenience, but as something that demands acknowledgement. And the silence that follows is different this time, not tense, but expectant, because now the next move belongs to Victoria, and everyone in the room feels it, even if they pretend not to. And she draws a slow breath, her fingers resting lightly against the table as if grounding herself. And when she speaks again, her voice is quieter, more controlled. "Then what exactly would you suggest?" she asks, and it is a different kind of question, not rhetorical, not dismissive, but real, because the structure of the moment has changed, and Ethan's gaze does not waver as he answers. "Start with the truth," he says, and for a second, that is all. Just those words, simple, direct, impossible to misunderstand, and they hang in the air long enough for their meaning to settle, not just on Victoria, but on everyone listening. Because truth, in a moment like this, is not about explanation, it is about acknowledgement. And Victoria's composure tightens again, not in defiance, but in resistance to something unfamiliar, because she is not used to being asked for this, not in this way, not in front of others. And yet the expectation remains, steady and unspoken, and her eyes shift, briefly, toward Lily, who still stands with the same quiet presence, unchanged by the shifting dynamics around her. And for the first time, Victoria sees her differently, not as a role, not as a position, but as a person who did not bend when it would have been easier to do so. And that realization, subtle as it is, carries weight. And when she looks back at Ethan, something in her expression has shifted, not completely, not fully resolved, but no longer untouched, and the room waits, silent, attentive, because whatever comes next will not just end the moment, it will define it. The silence holds for just a moment longer, not uncomfortable, but decisive, like the final breath before something shifts permanently. And Victoria's gaze lingers on Lily again, no longer scanning, no longer measuring, but actually seeing. And when she finally speaks, her voice is different, still controlled, still composed, but stripped of the edge that defined it before. "I was out of line," she says, the words simple, direct, and for a second, almost surprising in their clarity, and the room seems to exhale quietly, not in reaction, but in recognition, because the truth, when it finally arrives, has a way of settling everything at once. And Victoria continues, her tone steady. "I made assumptions I should not have made, and I spoke in a way that was not appropriate." And the statement is not dramatic, not exaggerated, but it is enough, because it is real. And Lily stands there, listening, not with triumph, not with relief, but with the same quiet composure she has held all evening. And when their eyes meet, there is no resentment there, no need to reclaim anything, just a calm acknowledgement of what has been said. And Ethan watches the exchange without interruption, his presence still steady, still grounded, and after a brief pause, he nods once, not as approval, but as recognition that the moment has reached its necessary point. "Thank you," he says simply, and the words carry more weight than anything louder could have, because they close the space without forcing it. And the manager shifts slightly beside them, his posture easing now that the tension has dissolved into something resolved, something contained. And Victoria reaches for her glass again, her movements slower, more deliberate, not as a display, but as a reset. And for the first time since the evening began, she looks at Lily without distance. "I would like to continue my dinner," she says, her tone calm, no longer sharp, no longer testing. And Lily nods gently. "Of course," she replies, her voice just as steady as before, and she steps forward, adjusting the placement of the plate, offering the same level of care she would give any guest, no more, no less, because for her, the standard never changed, and that is what makes it real. And as the moment settles fully, conversations in the room begin to return, softly at first, then gradually finding their rhythm again, as if nothing happened, and yet everything did. And Ethan remains where he is for a second longer, his gaze resting briefly on Lily, not lingering, not intrusive, just enough to acknowledge what has passed between them, a silent recognition of strength, of choice, of something that cannot be taught. And then he turns, returning to his table with the same quiet confidence he arrived with, his role in the moment complete, not because he needed to intervene, but because he chose to. And Lily continues her shift, moving through the restaurant with the same steady pace, the same calm focus. But something has changed, not in how she carries herself, but in how the space around her responds, a subtle shift, almost invisible, but real. And as the evening moves forward, the soft glow of the restaurant feels just a little different, not brighter, not louder, but clearer, like something unspoken has been understood, that respect is not something given by position, but revealed through action, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who changes it the most.